There we go. Welcome. So my name is Stuart Entwistle. I'm training manager for Osmond Ergonomics. And the topic for today's webinar is tips for home workers. So I aim for the webinar to last for about 50 minutes. And what I'll do is I'll give a quick introduction to Osmond Ergonomics and myself, for those of you who don't know us as well. And then we'll be looking at the risks when working at home, how we should have our chairs set up, looking at how we should have our equipment organised on our desks and tables, and then looking at some advice and guidance for wellbeing and mental health. And then right at the end, there's free resources as well. So the aims of this workshop is to get you to understand the potential risks of adopting poor postures, know how to set up your chair correctly, know what a good workstation setup looks like, and get an understanding of other hints and tips to help you manage your wellbeing and mental health. So just a brief introduction about myself. So I've been working with Osmond Ergonomics now for about almost 20 years. So 20 years in March, and I started off doing one-to-one training, giving training to end users who were receiving the equipment that we were being asked to provide, so mainly around seating. But after a few years of doing that, I needed a fresh challenge, so I became an advanced DSE assessor and still carry out assessments today because that's where I feel I learn my craft, shall we say. And we get involved in all sorts of assessments, from display screen equipment assessments through to escalated assessments where we just focus on one area, and then we do a lot with disabled students going into university as well. 2013, I started the role of training manager and mainly delivering external training, but also giving an overview for our internal training for staff as well. So who are we? So we're sorry, get my words out. We're Osmond Ergonomics, and we just provide products and services to improve well-being and productivity within the workplace. Our main office, our head office, is based in Wimborne, just outside of Bournemouth, and that's where I'm delivering this webinar today. We're Chartered Institute of Ergonomics and Human Factors corporate members, and we've also just recently submitted 5 courses to the IISM, the International Institute of Risk Safety Management, for them to approve the training, and we had that through over Christmas, so we're pleased to sort of have that again for the next 3 years. If you have to speak to any of my colleagues, then we're all advanced DSE assessors, and we've all done a 3-day ergonomics in practice course. So any questions you have, we will be able to answer those without any problems. And my colleagues in the customer service team have a great knowledge base as well. We also do a lot of internal training days ourselves, and it's not just looking at the next shiny new product. We actually take a more holistic approach. So some examples on screen: we've done dyslexia awareness, mental health and mindfulness. We've done advanced driver training for all my colleagues on the road. So we take quite a broad sort of approach to our training and try and cover all sorts of things. Right, so on to the topic for today then, tips for home workers. So we've all been put into this situation now where we're being asked to work from home, and it's probably something that we never even considered, the beginning of last year, that we would all have to work from home, whether we had the space or the equipment to do that. We as a company are seeing a lot of problems coming through from staff who are being asked to work from home, and a lot of it is down to physical issues, psychological, and then, as I say, the working environment they have to work in. Not everyone has the luxury of a spare room which they can turn into an office. So the potential risk when we are working at home, we just focus on the physical side of things, and a lot of these or some of these haven't really changed from the office to home. The problems are still there because we're still using computers. So the physical issues that we generally see when we're using computer equipment is, the first one is musculoskeletal disorders. So that's the obvious one and the main one that I see as an assessor. And musculoskeletal disorders, often shortened to MSDs, they refer to a group of condition characterized by pain and loss of physical function. So that's anything from sort of lower back pain, joint injuries, neck pain, muscular aches and strains, or just non-specific arm pain like a repetitive strain injury. So those are the physical things that can develop, and later on in the webinar I'll just go through sort of how these problems tend to develop whilst we're working in front of our computers. Eye fatigue is also an issue, which I don't think sort of gets focused on a lot, but our eyes become tired when we're just staring at a fixed point, and our eyes need to be sort of looking around. That's how they work best. And when our eyes get fatigued, then we tend to start leaning forward and look and being drawn into our screen. So that affects our overall posture, puts loading on the back and the neck, etc. So we need to make sure that we keep our eyes as healthy as we can so that we can see our screen clearly without having to sort of adopt a poor posture to be able to see what we're doing, because ultimately whatever we're looking at is going to affect our posture in one way or another. But our eyes, in terms of how they work, they keep themselves refreshed by keeping the eyes hydrated, and that's through blinking. Each time we blink, eyes released little tears into the eyes themselves, so that they remain moist and hydrated. The eyes also tend, when we're walking around and we're doing different activities, they're looking at different viewing points. So the muscles in the eyes are being asked to sort of move and work regularly, which is good for them. They like doing that. But when we stare at a screen, we tend to find that our eyes are fixed on one point and our blink rate reduces. So then when our blink rate reduces, our eyes start to dry and they start to sort of become irritated and sore. And we want to try and address that. So the advice generally would be to look at something after 20 minutes, look at something 20 feet away for about 20 seconds. What that will do is allow the muscles in the eyes to move and get out of that fixed position. Your blink rate will also start to increase as well, which will rehydrate the eyes and make them feel a bit healthier. So every 20 minutes, if you're able just to look away, stare out the window, just for 20 seconds, just to give the eyes a break, and then you come back to what you were doing. And I think eye fatigue is probably something that we would experience more at home than we would in the office, because offices tend to be open planned. We tend to be quite nosy as human beings. So if there's something going on at the other end of the office, we will look up and look at what's going on. Whereas if we're stuck at home in the spare bedroom or wherever it may be, then there is a chance that we just end up staring at the screen for too long and our eyes become tired. We also have issues on stress as well. When physically and psychologically, but physically, when we're stressed, we tend to tense the body, and we don't want to work in a tense posture. We want to try and keep the body as relaxed as possible while we're working. So we want to sort of manage stress issues. And as I say, later on, I'll cover some tips in ways in which we can do that. So then we come on to the psychological aspects of working from home. You know, I've mentioned a minute ago, we could be in our spare room on our own working. So that loneliness, that isolation can sort of creep in, and it can affect people in different ways. And quite often it could come out in the form of anxiety or stress. Because we're social people, we tend to, we like to talk to colleagues, we like to talk to people, we like to be around people. So having that isolation can cause problems. So we have the anxiety and stress as well. Anxiety and stress, that can creep in over time. It can have quite detrimental effects in terms of productivity, confidence, everything like that. So it's a good idea to talk to colleagues, talk to managers, and try and tackle these anxiety issues or stress issues that may be creeping in, because otherwise, if it's left unchecked, then it can develop into more serious stress-related issues like depression. So we want to make sure that, as I say, we talk to people, we talk to our colleagues, we get fresh air during our day, and exercise, and these things all help to sort of manage those issues with the psychological side of things. Oh, too early. And then we have the working environment. So, we're in our own homes, we're in our own bedroom, spare room. So we need to make sure that, our environment is set up as well as we can. We reduce any risks. And the obvious one to me would be sort of the risk of fire using electrical equipment. So, we've all got a lot more electrical equipment at home. So monitors, laptops, it could be printers, all these sort of things. So we need to make sure that we look up, we make sure that we look after our equipment, make sure it's safe, make sure it's working properly. And then also the personal safety would be to make sure that you have maybe a plan, an escape route. Now, I have an escape route, which I've, discussed with my wife, and this was even before working from home. So I have an idea of how we would get out of the house in the event of an emergency. So I think those sort of things should be thought about as well, possibly just in case. So in terms of why we need to look after our posture, well, the obvious one is that, to try and prevent these aches and pains creeping in. And the reason for that is we're not designed to maintain static postures for long periods of time. We're designed to be stood up and moving. That's how Mother Nature designed us to be. And there's lots of studies out there, and this was pre-COVID, where people would suggest, researchers would suggest that we spend up to sort of 14 hours of our waking day, seated. And you're probably thinking, well, when I was going into the office, I don't think I was seated that much. But actually, if you think about your day, you get up. Most of us will commute into work via a car, train, bus, something like that. So we're seated. We're in the car. We try and park as close as we can to the entrance to our office. And then we go straight to our desk. We sit there all morning. Not many people take regular breaks as advised. Many people spend their lunch break at their desk as well, and then they'll repeat that morning cycle in the afternoon, and then there's the commute home, and then we sit down for the family meal and then sit down to watch TV. So we can spend a lot of our time seated, and most of these problems build up without us noticing. They develop under the skin until there is a trigger generally. And quite often triggers to me when I'm going to do assessments, people, when it comes to lower back pain, as an example, people will describe to me that they dropped something on the floor, they picked it up and their lower back, they pulled a muscle or they did some damage to their lower back, and they blame the picking up the pen as the reason why. But actually, if you looked at their habits, their working habits, their lifestyle, you could probably say actually, over the duration of however many years, that's been the build up to the problem. The picking up the pen was just the straw that broke the camel's back. So we need to make sure that we sort of adopt better habits to prevent the onset of this pain and these problems developing. And we don't leave these sort of aches and pains in our pedestal, in our drawers, cupboards, on our desk when we finish for the day. They're with us 24/7. So again, I've spoken to lots of people where the aches and pains may not have been caused by work, but maybe work has exacerbated them. They've been sort of poor at adopting better habits, and as a consequence it's had quite a dramatic effect on their personal life as well. They're restricted on what they can and can't do because of that pain or that limited mobility that they may have, for example. So we need to make sure that we adopt these better habits, because as I say, there's that cost to us in terms of carrying that pain and that problem with us, but there's also a cost to business as well. And if you look on the Health and Safety Executive website, I think from the last time I looked, they are suggesting that over 30 million working days are lost through either musculoskeletal disorders or mental health issues. So, that's a lot of cost to the business. And then there's also that cost to the business of loss of productivity. So that time when you start being distracted by that pain, you can't work as effectively as you have done until it gets to the point where you actually have to take time off. So there is a cost to the business during that period as well. And we would generally call that presenteeism costs. So if we move on to the body a little bit and try and give you some examples or some ideas on what's going on. Now, I'm not medically trained. I've just learned on the job, shall we say. So been part of a lot of conferences, talks with physiotherapists, so I've learned over the years. But the body is made up of a skeleton. That's the main framework. And then we have ligaments, tendons, nerves, and muscles. And muscles I'll come on to in a minute. So you tend to find ligaments and tendons, they're connected either bone to bone or bone to muscle. And we need to make sure that, we sort of look after ligaments and tendons. One of the problems I tend to find is that when we adopt poor postures for long durations of time or long time in terms of over months and years, then ligaments and tendons can stretch and they can contract. So as an example, if you've got someone who's quite broad in the shoulders using a small keyboard, they will often roll their shoulders inwards. Now that's going to stretch all the ligaments, tendons across the upper back, and then it will contract in the front of the shoulder. So when you go to try and adopt a better posture, it feels strange because you're trying to have to train the ligaments and tendons within the body, and it can happen in other areas of the body. Also with tendons, we have to watch out that we don't inflame them. So if we look at the image on the screen, that's an image, a dissection of the carpal tunnel area. So as you can see, there's muscles, there's the carpal bones, there's nerves and blood flow and everything through there. But those tendons, when we move our fingers, those tendons are moving backwards and forwards through the carpal tunnel, and there isn't a lot of space there. So when tendons rub against each other, or nerves or blood supplies, then they can become inflamed, and that's what we call tendonitis. So once the tendon starts to get inflamed in the wrist, it's very hard to sort of reduce that inflammation because there isn't a lot of space there to start with. So, and we have to use our hands and fingers quite a lot during the day, even if it's not for working. So we want to sort of be aware of that. And then the nerves, they just relay messages to and from the brain. And I can come on to that in terms of, in a minute, in terms of how the nerves sort of, where we get messages from in different parts of the body. Now, when it comes on to muscles, that's where I probably see a lot of problems, is pulled muscles, muscles that spasm. And the reason for that is muscles are designed to be relaxed or moving. And if we look at the graph that's on the screen in front of you, we have three different types of activity. So we have resting, dynamic effort, and static effort. So resting is typically when we're laid down asleep. Dynamic effort is when we're walking down the street, going down the gym, climbing a flight of stairs. And you've got static effort, which I imagine most of you are doing now while you're sat watching this webinar or listening to this webinar. We also have two colored columns for each activity, and it's the blood flow that is needed to that muscle group, the lighter color column, and then the darker colored column, which is the blood flow that's actually provided to that muscle group during that activity. So when we're resting, the muscles don't need a lot of blood and nutrients provided to them because they're relaxed and they're rested. So because we're not moving, we don't get a huge amount of fresh blood and nutrients supplied to the muscles, but because they're relaxed, they're happy. When we look at dynamic effort, the muscles need a lot more or greater increase in fresh blood, nutrients and everything provided to them to keep them happy and healthy. And because we are moving and we're asking the muscles to work like pumps and draw the fresh blood and nutrients in and expel the waste products like lactic acid, you know, the body's happy again, I suppose depending on our level of fitness, of course. And then we have static effort, which is, so when we're sat down or we're just doing something that doesn't involve any movement, then the muscles are working. So if we're stood in one position for a long period of time, if we're seated for a long period of time, there are muscle groups that are working. But because we're not moving, the muscles are using all of those all that fresh blood, nutrients and oxygen that have been provided to them when we sat down or when we stopped moving. But because we're not moving, the muscles use that up, create waste products, but they don't get expelled out of the muscles. So you end up getting sort of that achiness starting to creep in. And an easy way to sort of demonstrate static muscle effort is if you were to put both arms out in front of you, keep one arm static and then move the other one up and down. One of your arms should start to tire around the shoulder area. And I imagine by now it's probably the static one. So that's just an easy demonstration of what's happening with static muscle load on that subject. So then we move on to the spine, because a lot of problems I see sort of originate from the spine, and it's just from our poor posture. Now, when I deliver this face to face, I have props, I have a model of the spine, and we can go through it. So I've tried to replicate that for this virtual version and just have an image on screen. So what you're looking at is the spine, the back of the spine. So at the bottom, you have the pelvis, at the top, you have the where the skull would be positioned, and the spine is pretty much divided into three sections. You have the cervical, which is the neck, thoracic, which is the torso of the body where your rib cage is, and then the lumbar area. Each white sort of or ivory colored section is a vertebrae, and they're labeled or they're numbered from top to bottom in each of their relevant sections. And the most common area for me to see problems now is between vertebrae L4 and L5 at the bottom. So disc problems there, or muscle related issues. And then up in the neck is a common area as well to sort of see problems. Then you can just make out on the picture, there's little yellow sort of little tabs sort of sticking out. That's the nervous system, your spinal cord, the nervous cord. And coming out of there, you'll have nerves which go down to different areas of the body. So in a very simple description, the nerves that come out the neck go into the shoulder and down into the hand, down the arms and into the hands. The nerves in the thoracic area of the spine, they service sort of your vital organs and everything sort of around your chest and torso. And then the lumbar area, you have nerves that come out and go into the buttocks, into the pelvis, down into the legs. So I imagine quite a lot of you have heard of the sciatic nerve, and that originates in the lumbar region and then goes down into the buttocks and then across the legs and then down into the feet as well. So, so with the nerves, you can quite often experience pain somewhere in the body, but that's not where it's originating from. It could be originating from somewhere in the back because of a problem around there. So, you know, I find the body works in strange and weird ways, and that's what sort of keeps me fascinated in it. We also have a problem with the neck as well, and we're seeing this more now where people are being asked to use laptops and they haven't been provided any additional equipment. Or just generally using smart devices, so your smartphones or your tablets. Now, the head weighs about 5 kilos. So to try and give you some examples of what 5 kilos is, maybe 5 liters of water, a 10-pin bowling ball. Someone told me that the average cat weighs about 5 kilos. So that's how heavy our head is. And when we're stood up, the body is balanced, we're moving around, so the head and the muscles and the neck and everything like that are fairly happy. Now, when we start to sit down, we unbalance the body, and then as we start to lean forward, we increase the effective weight on the neck and down through the spine. So if you lean forward about 3 inches, then you could effectively increase the weight of the head to 20 kilos. And that's quite a weight to ask your sort of neck and the spine and all the muscles, joints, ligaments and everything to support. And if we go back to sort of static muscle load, if any of you start, you know, experience any sort of discomfort in the neck, any soreness, any sort of reduced movement, mobility, then maybe think about what you've been doing the previous day or the previous weeks. You know, have you been looking at something that's too low? Because I imagine with that sedentary postures we adopt, looking down for long periods, maybe the neck muscles are just getting very tired due to that. So when it comes to working at home, what we need to do is sort of actually think about where we're going to work. That's probably the best place to start, and make sure that we avoid using soft seating, sofas, beds, all those sort of things, because as tempting as they may be to sort of work, they're not very good for our mindset or our posture. So what I would suggest is, as far as possible, try and replicate your office setup if you can. So use a chair and a table. If you've only got a dining table, a dining chair, then I can offer advice on how we can sort of use those pieces of furniture to sort of improve, or how we can improve our posture using those pieces of furniture. But you can, I wouldn't say, you know, avoid all soft seating, because later on I'll give some ideas on how we can sort of introduce movement. And sometimes sofas can sort of come into their own as another place to sort of do a short amount of work, because quite often the next posture is the best posture. So we want to also make sure that we're away from too many distractions if possible. And I know that's difficult at the moment. I have 2 teenage daughters at home who are homeschooling. I have a wife who works part-time as well. I'm trying to work as well. So it can get very distracting. It can get very frustrating at times. So we want to make sure we can, as far as possible, just try and get ourselves from too many distractions, because otherwise, with myself, if I feel as I'm being distracted, I don't feel as I'm productive, which then sort of affects my, so I suppose my mental health to a point, because I don't feel as I've got enough done and I need to do more. And then that could end up leading me into an unhealthy work-life balance, because I may end up doing more hours than I would do if I was in the office. When we set up our workstation, we want to set the equipment up right, at right angles, to the windows where possible. That way we can avoid glare coming in from behind and affecting what you can see on the screen. Alternatively, it's quite tempting to sort of set your screen up so that you're looking out of the window to sort of get that view. But the problem is, when we get a sunny day and the sun comes in through the windows, the eyes have a problem with trying to balance the natural light coming in through the window and the light being put out by your monitor, and the light being put out by your monitor is a lot dimmer compared to the sunlight coming through the window. So the eyes struggle with trying to balance the amount of light that they're receiving, so that can increase the fatigue that we could experience with our eyes. So where possible, just try and sit your monitor or your screen sort of 90 degrees to a window, or if you have curtains then, or blinds, then maybe just draw them across it if you don't have any other sort of option. Quite often spare bedrooms can be quite dimly lit because they're small windows, a small space. So it's a useful game for the eyes just to maybe use a task lamp, just to sort of light up the desk area, the table area where you're working. And again, that will reduce eye fatigue and also prevent the problem of maybe leaning forward frequently to look at whatever you're looking at on your desk table because you can't see it properly. So when it comes to sitting postures, we want to make sure that we are set up correctly. Sitting with the toe of the chair too low from the too low and too far away from the desk can just encourage additional pressure on the lower back. We end up sort of leaning forward because we're too far away. We end up putting a lot of weight on our forearms and up into our shoulders. And also with the leaning forward, we put a lot of strain on the neck from the weight of the head and all the way down through the spine. Now, I saw some information recently that suggests that when we sit down with our chair, with our chair back at 90 degrees, and when we're leant against that, we actually increase the pressure experienced on the discs by 40% compared to standing. So although a lot of people, I think that sitting down actually helps the body and, we're relaxed and supported, actually the actual pressures being put on us from gravity when we're seated on the lower back is increased by 40%. If you lean forwards to work, then you're actually increasing the pressure on the lower back or the disc on the lower back by 90%. So that's why we need to make sure that we're not leaning forward and we're actually sat in a good posture. We want to avoid hooking our feet around the star base of a chair or around the legs of a chair because that's just going to reduce the blood flow around the legs and back up to the rest of the body. So we want to make sure that we stop that. And then all of this just essentially tends to cause muscle tension, which, as I've explained earlier, the muscles don't like. So we want to make sure that we sit close to the desk, the table that we're using. We sit back in the seat. We want to, if possible, we want to adjust the chair back so the upper body is nice and relaxed and supported. We also want to raise the chair so that our elbows are level with the top of the desk or the table. What I would say is if you are using a dining room chair or a fixed chair that can't be adjusted, then there's no reason why you can't put a cushion underneath on your seat, so you end up raising yourself up, because we're not talking about a lot of increase in height. We're probably only talking about a couple of centimeters for the majority. So a couple of cushions underneath yourself on the seat when you're seated will raise you up, and then perhaps just use a cushion in your lower back or maybe a rolled up hand towel or something, so that we're increasing that support into the lower back and taking some of the strain out of the discs and muscles in that area. If when you raise yourself up, you can't touch the floor, then ideally you need to be using a footrest, so just something to rest your feet on. But there's no harm in using a box or maybe an encyclopedia or some chunky books or something, just so you've got somewhere to rest your feet to take off the pressure underneath the thighs. Oh, so moving forward one more. What I would suggest, if you're having difficulty in setting up your chair, is just to move it away from the desk. If you've got an adjustable chair, go through and start with the seat height and getting that set so that your feet are comfortably on the floor with your knees lower than your hips. Recline that backrest to about 100 degrees in relation to the seat or in relation to horizontal, so that you can sit back a little bit more. Adjust the height and get the lumbar support sorted out. And once you've got that comfortable, then you can bring the chair back into your desk and then readjust the height so your elbows are just above the height of the desk, so that when you're typing, your hand should just naturally rest on the keyboard. If you're of a taller stature and you feel as though you need to lower your chair to work at the table or desk that you've got, then I would suggest not adjusting your height, but adjusting the height of the table, so raising it up just an inch or so, just to reduce the need for you to lower your chair, which then puts extra pressure on the lower back. So when it comes to the desks, or our tables, we want to make sure that we use the space that we've got available, so that we can, so we don't have to adopt poor postures. So what I mean by that is using the equipment that, placing the equipment that we use most regularly closest to us. And as an assessor, I quite often talk about reach zones to people that I am assessing, and there are 3 reach zones on a desk. And the first one is the zone that is closest to you, and how you mark out that zone of essentially is to have your elbows at 90 degrees, forearms horizontal with the ground, and then you just hover your arms in an arc over the desk or table. And then that space that you're covering is where your keyboard and mouse will go, and any other equipment that you're using regularly throughout the day. Then we have a second space, which is determined by stretching your arms out. So if you place your arms out in front of you and then do another arc, that second bit of space is possibly where your telephone would go, where your cup of coffee, tea, glass of water would go. And then anything that you're using during the day, but not as frequently as the keyboard or mouse. And then anything else that you have to use during the course of the week, I would say, that you're referencing every now and again, that would go towards the back of the desk. So what we're doing is we're prioritizing the frequency of how we're using our equipment and papers versus sort of how much stretching we have to do. So we don't want to be constantly stretching and putting our body into poor postures to carry out an activity. So by organizing our desktop so we can reach the frequent equipment easily without causing muscle load, muscle strain, or strain to the lower back. Because if we haven't moved for a while and then we suddenly go to stretch, then there is, I think, a risk of just sort of twinging something in our body. So we want to make sure that we sort of prioritize that. If you're using documents, we want to place those between keyboard and monitor, and if possible, just put them on an angled slope or a document holder. There's plenty of different types around, but you could use a foolscap folder. Just place that behind your keyboard, so that will have a little angled slope on it, so you can rest your documents on there. So then that is in line of sight between keyboard and monitor, so there's no looking to the left or right and looking down for long periods. You can just glance at your document and then just carry on working. If you're using a telephone, then I generally recommend telephones go on the non-dominant side of the body, because it's quite easy to use a telephone with a non-dominant hand. And what you end up doing then is you end up sharing that workload between the non-dominant and the dominant side of the body. If you're on the phone for long periods of time due to the nature of your work, then a headset is advisable, just to free up the arms and then just keep the neck and the shoulders and the arms all nice and relaxed. Now, screen height is something that often gets talked about, and a lot of people, I feel, sort of aware of screen heights, where they should go, but they set the screen height according to how they're sat, and they forget to set up their chair first. But I don't need to go into the risks of having your screen too low, whether it's a laptop or a monitor, because I've sort of covered that with the head weights. So how we should be having our monitors positioned, typically it depends on, I suppose, our typing skills. If we're a touch typist, then we can have our monitor set as the image shows on the the top image shows, so G3A. So we get the screen position so that when we're looking straight ahead, we should just be able to see the visible part of the top of the screen. So then when we're typing, our neck is in a neutral posture, and the loading on those muscles is very minimal. Now, if you're a hunt and peck typist like I am, so I use 1 or 2 fingers on each hand, I look at the keyboard, I hunt out my keys and I peck away. So having the screen positioned as I've just described would probably introduce a lot of repetitive nodding, because I need to look at the keyboard and I need to look at the screen. So what I need to do for myself is just to lower the screen down ever so slightly. So you can see on the bottom image, that laptop screen is a little bit lower than the monitor screen, and that's for a hunt and peck typist, because what I want to try and achieve is to do that movement from screen to keyboard using my eyes rather than using my head and neck. So with the keyboard on the desk, I should be able to just look down with my eyes and then be able to see the keyboard, and then as I look up with my eyes, I should be able to just see the screen as well. So So that's the ideal position in height for the screen. There are plenty of stands, whether it's a laptop or monitor available. But if you just need something temporary, then a box or a book or something just to sort of position your laptop on or your monitor on. If you're using a laptop, plug in a separate keyboard and mouse. I think households generally have a keyboard and mouse lying around, and most computers now, you just plug in your keyboard and mouse, wait a few seconds, and then they'll be working. So with your laptop on some books to raise the screen, separate keyboard and mouse, that will greatly improve your posture and greatly improve your comfort as well as the day goes on. So I mentioned about well-being and mental health. So hopefully what we've just covered in terms of why these problems develop, physical problems develop, and how we should have our computer and equipment and chairs set up. Hopefully that's been helpful for you. But in terms of psychological issues and well-being and mental health, here's some bits that myself and my colleagues have sort of put together, other bits from other sources online, but actually this works really well for me. And the first thing is to try and keep to normal routines. Now I think, as my personality, I like routine. I like to know sort of what's going on, that I have a routine. So having to suddenly work from home permanently, do everything virtually, that messed up my normal routine. So I had to try and find ways of sort of trying to keep them, shall we say. So when I first started working from home, I would get up and I would put my work shirt on and I would dress as though I was going to work, and that sort of started to set my mind into a work mode. I would also then around the time I'd normally get in the car to commute to the office, I would go out for a walk, and I'd just walk around the block, come back in the house, and that replaced my commute. So then I've kind of been outside, I've got some movement, got a bit of fresh air, but I've also set my mind for the working day. Also, I find it, we need to start at I'm assuming all employees of companies, we're having to start and at the same time as we normally would, but it's good to have some flexibility in our day, because then we can sort of make use of the benefits of working from home. So but start and end the day at fixed times, and make sure you don't run in terms of working hours, because we need to make sure that we have a healthy work-life balance. The body needs time to relax, both physically and mentally. And I'm a big fan of getting a good night's sleep, because for me, I find that if I don't get a good night's sleep, then it's one of those triggers that starts to sort of bring in those anxieties, those worries, because I'm just tired. So I make sure that I get a good night's sleep. Also, the body does a lot of things when we're sleeping that scientists are only just starting to discover. So I think there is a lot more to sleep than just sleeping, shall we say. So you want to make sure you have that healthy work-life balance. You need time to unwind from the day. Something else I also do on a regular occurrence is to create a to-do list. Now, I do two to-do lists. I do one at the end of the day. So all of that work that I haven't sort of managed to get to, I put on the list. And then when I wake up in the morning and I turn on my laptop, then I create, and then I add to that list anything else that has come in overnight, anything that I have thought of that I need to do. So I create a list, and then that helps me to sort of keep myself productive. But it also, at the end of the day, I find it very useful to go back to that list and sort of see everything that I've crossed off, because it's quite easy to, when you're isolated and on your own, to sort of just go through the work and then actually think at the end of the day, God, I know I've been busy, but I actually don't know what I've done to a certain point. So it's nice to go back through that list and say, actually, yeah, look at all that work I've done. It helps my mental health with that. So make sure you create a list. Regular breaks during the day. Don't be tempted to sort of just sit there all day. Ask a partner or anyone to sort of bring you drinks, bring you food, whatever. Get up and go for regular breaks. Drink plenty of fluids. That's a good one to try and incorporate breaks into your day, because it will create natural breaks. Whatever comes in has to go out again. And about a bladder full is how long we want to sit for. So ideally, we don't want to sit for any longer than an hour without any movement. And what I'd probably suggest is also think about the activities you're doing, because there are certain activities where we don't need to use a keyboard, we don't need to be looking at a screen. So why not stand up for phone calls, as an example, or maybe just move to the sofa if you're going to watch a webinar, for example, or maybe just speak to colleagues. Next posture is good posture, and movement is great for us as well. Some employers, you could talk to managers and say, actually, it'd be nice if I could sort of take the benefits or use some of the benefits of working from home. So maybe taking the dog for a walk at lunchtime, maybe doing some of those household chores that we tend to leave till the end of the day. So there may be a chance of speaking with management and saying, actually, if I sort of take an extra half hour for lunch, I'll add that on to the end of the day. So the day tends to become a little bit sort of more flexible, so then we can actually do stuff during the day, which isn't going to impact our work, but actually it helps to sort of our mental health. And again, that could be something if you've got children schooling at home, if you have to stop for half an hour to give them support, then if your employer says that's fine, providing you sort of make up the time, then, I think that's a good idea. And also make sure we've got plenty of oxygen coming into the room that you're working in. It's quite tempting in the weather that we're experiencing at the moment just to keep all the windows shut. But if you're in a small room, then you start to use up all that oxygen, which affects our sort of productivity, affects our mental health. So make sure we get plenty of fresh air coming into the room, or even go out for a walk for sort of 10, 15 minutes regularly during the day if you can. Now, I'm fortunate I've got a couple of bridleways that are near me, so I can sort of do a 10-minute walk. And it does me a wonder, especially when I'm got to that point in a piece of work where I'm starting to struggle for the next words or for the answer. Going for a walk for 10 minutes actually helps clear the mind. And when I come back, I usually have the answer. I mentioned just a minute ago, stand when making telephone, video calls, move around whenever possible. So, we need to move regularly, and you'll feel the benefits of it as the afternoon sort of goes on and at the end of the day. I mentioned earlier about keeping in regular contact with colleagues to reduce the feelings of isolation. So, some companies, they schedule virtual coffee breaks. A team will sort of get together at 10 o'clock, for example, not to talk about work, but just to talk about what you would normally talk about in the office, about home life, what you did at the weekend, what you watched last night, what you had for dinner. So it's nice to just have these 10-minute virtual coffee breaks, so you actually feel as though you're still part of a team. And it does wonders for the mind, socializing. And I know that I saw a couple of things on LinkedIn recently where the questions have gone out to say, if you're using, I think it was relating to Teams, you can have breakout or you can have chat options, and sort of how professional should we be keeping these chats within the business with colleagues. And there was quite a lot of consensus from what I read to say, actually, why don't we use emojis? Why don't we use sort of just general chit chat as we would do if we were in the office on a Monday morning talking about our weekend? So maybe, just as make things a bit more friendly, we can sort of introduce things like that. So if you are feeling isolated or anxious, then what I would suggest is speak to someone, whether it's a colleague who you trust. Speaking helps, or maybe speak to a manager. If it's something that's workload related or something, just work related, then speak to your manager, and then sort of, because no one can do anything unless you speak to someone. Or if you have an employee assistance program, so EAP, then I imagine there'll be a number to call, an email that you could and an email address you could email just to get some support from them as well. So that would be another line of inquiry that you could make if you were starting to feel a bit anxious or isolated. So that's the end of the webinar today. Now, I forgot to mention earlier that we weren't taking questions via mics, but what I will do is take questions via the chat. So if you've got any questions, please do put them in the chat. And what I'll do is I'll just go through some of the resources that I mentioned while we're looking at, well, you're typing away. So, right. So, something's gone wrong here. So the review of the aims was to understand the potential risks of adopting poor postures. Hopefully I've gone through that and you're all happy with that. Hopefully you've got some ideas of how to set up your chair, whether it's a fixed one or an office one, know what a good workstation looks like, so how you have your monitor set up, keyboard position, mouse, etc. And then hopefully some of those tips I've just gone through will sort of help with managing the well-being and mental health side of things. So the free resources that we've got available, we've got a lot of posture guidance, stretching and agile working information, and that can be found following the link. And we'll put a copy of this presentation out for attendees. We've always had an e-bulletin, which has been going, I think, for 9 years now, I think. So you can see archived e-bulletins from the link. You can also see our latest one. We've also just created a product radar. So new products that we put into our portfolio, you can be notified of when they come in. So if that's of interest, you can follow the link and you can see all of that via the link. Social media, we're all on social media. I've got a personal page or company page on, personal page on LinkedIn. We have a company page on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter. So we're trying to put relevant, useful information out with health and safety, ergonomics, well-being, new things that we're introducing as a company. So to keep up to date, it's a good place to see the information we're putting out. We work with a lot of other organizations because we're not experts in everything. So Fitback Physiotherapy, they have 7 Super 7 exercises in 7 minutes to strengthen your back. So you can get that from the link there. And then Cardinus, we work with them when it comes to delivering online DSE assessments and other risk assessment modules, but they have an app which is available through the App Store and Google Play. If you search Healthy Working, then the app will give you a visual sort of posture guidance. It will give you advice. So it's a really useful app just to have, just to sort of to check things if you're sort of not sure whether you're doing things right. And then we also work with Champion Health and they offer workplace health and mental health training or online mental health training. So again, they're a good group of guys there, and they offer a lot of help in terms of helping to manage mental health within organizations. My contacts are there. So if you've got any questions after today, then by all means, please drop me an email or give me a call. I'm happy to, or give my colleagues a call, happy to answer any questions that you may have from today. If you're interested in any further training, then just go to our training page. We've just had our DSE assessor course accredited again for virtual delivery as well as face-to-face when that happens. And we've also introduced some new postural awareness courses, so for laboratories, for vehicles, etc. So have a look on those. If there's any interest in them, please let me know.